So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another preview of the upcoming new patch. And this is going to be a 3v5, which is something we haven't actually seen on the test build for quite a while. Most of the battles I've been able to show off on that version of the game, or this version of the game I should say, have been 4v4s, most of which being siege battles still, but it has been quite a while since we've seen this particular setup, and this does put a bit more pressure on the defenders, of course, because there's a lot of numbers coming their way. But it does mean that they will have a very distinct advantage in terms of quality, and it's going to be kind of an interesting matchup from that perspective, because we have, I believe, 3 Numenor armies on the defence, and as I mentioned at the tail end of the last battle, we will be seeing Umbar again, and I think they are all of the attackers, so it's not as if they're going to have nothing in terms of quality, but I think they're going to have to dip into a lot of their newly returned Corsairs just in order to be able to really leverage some of that quality that they do have. As for the map itself, this is intended to be an Umbaran invasion of the Numenor island, so this is going to be a settlement from there. Interesting setup as well. I mean, once again, it's going to have quite a few ways in, at least initially, but there's a lot of good places within the settlement itself, I think, for the defenders to really start to fortify themselves. But yeah, some more open ground, some good choke points though, bridges, which always for the attackers is going to be an obstacle for them to overcome. But yeah, we'll see how this develops. We will go through the attackers first and foremost, as we often do, starting off with the first Umbar force over here under the command of NUMENORIAN. So you can see here that he has indeed got some of the Corsairs here, and going in for some of these numbers, obviously 253 of them, but very, very basic, very, very easy to kill with ranged units, not a huge amount of defense, not a huge amount of attack either, very much in opposition to most of the upper levels that Umbar have access to. And then we also have over here the Umbar Axe Guard. So previously, of course, we've seen the Umbar Axe Guard be only the upgraded version, previously called the Balakith Axe Guard. So this gives kind of an indication of what they're all about now. I mean, there's still only 123 of them, so even in this form, they're going to be pretty damaging. And indeed, among Axemen, as we have often said before, they're actually pretty good in terms of melee defense, relatively speaking. But without any sort of armor value as they have here, it does make them a very much a one-trick pony, and archers will be a very, very good way of dealing with them, especially with the limited numbers that they have. Balagai footmen, as always, in this sort of situation for Umbar, will make the most reliable frontline troop that they have. Not particularly damaging, especially against some of the higher tier units that a faction like Numenor is able to provide, but still solid enough, especially in comparison to the Corsair units that we saw previously. Some fully upgraded Balagai pikemen as well, obviously having access to several tiers of armour upgrade, which Umbar still, or now, seem to have. And that does help mitigate some of the problems that some of their lower tier units could have had. I mean, the Balagai pikemen still don't have a shield like the other unit of pikes Umbar have access to, but still, if you have access to this sort of unit, you are going to want to use them to fortify your line, anchor it in place at some point. And Numenor, honestly, when it comes to their archer corps, they don't have a huge amount of options. The ones they do have are pretty good, but it's not as if you're talking about going up against the elves or other such archer-heavy factions. Numenor, much more about their upfront melee prowess, which Umbar will be hoping to contest with them, given the numbers advantage that they do have. Corsair Blackguards offering a good supporting unit for the front line as well. They can, of course, muck in melee once they're out of ammunition, and obviously, good amounts of javelin damage, and then also charging into melee to add their expertise there as medium infantry. The Alcarondas Legion, which are a match, of course, for the standard units that Numenor will have at the centre of their army. Pretty expensive, though, and bringing this amount of them for NUMENORIAN would have been an expensive endeavour. But again, Umbar always are going to have some sort of quality edge to them. We have the Merc crossbows, which can be used as standard crossbows, or they can also be used to try and prevent any sort of sally out. The Numenor cavalry is pretty limited in terms of what it is. I mean, they do have some good options, including a newly made javelin cavalry unit, of course, but the Merc crossbows, if they're used to good effect and if micro is not lost on them, then Merc crossbows should be good enough to keep Numenor's cavalry bottled up. If indeed Numenor have brought any in a 3v5, that's very, very risky. And then a couple of units of Narinaru Sentinels, of course, and this is a very tough unit of pikes indeed, one of the toughest in fact. Very, very good armour, front-facing shields, all of these sorts of things means that they get away really from some of the standard weaknesses that pikes can have. And there's some Balagai archers in there as well, another unit of them. I imagine that the Umbar army is going to be fairly similar to one another. Again, we have this name, this sort of Lovecraftian set of characters. We have some Balagai footmen on the front once again, with the armour upgrade this time, just to make them that a little bit more resilient. They'll be the first ones in, although I imagine there will be a little bit of a grace period to allow the third Numenor army to get back inside the settlement, but very, very close, easy access to the front gate. Nara and Aru Sentinels, once again, not too surprising there. Harbingers of Castamere, who just about, of course, the last time we saw Umbar in the test build, were able to see them over the line. Only just, of course, but it does show how that quality right at the end of the battle can make all the difference, and the Harbingers may not be quite on the same level as something like the Pharazim Swordmasters, but still, you can see where they get their heritage from. Umbar Axguard once again. Again, this armour piercing will be useful. Numenor, of course, one of those factions which certainly pack on that armour, though they also have some good skill to back it up. Nara and Aru Royal Guard, really good skirmishing archer. This possibly one of the best skirmishing archers in the game. Very high in terms of their armour score, so they're going to be able to trade back and forth for a good long time. You know, the damage is not as high as some of the other archers in the game, but it's high enough to the point where, in conjunction with the armour, they should be able to win most skirmish fights. And yeah, also locked morale means that they're not going to run even when things start to get a little bit hairy. Again, more Corsairs for the numbers, more Nara and Aru Sentinels as well. A full line of Alcarondas Legion once more with Umbar Axguard, so again, not skimping in terms of quality here, are they? Although many units of Corsairs back here do add to that numbers edge that they should have. So yeah, plenty of Corsairs, and then mostly melee over here. In fact, I think entirely melee for this player, for the third attacking army. This should be interesting. So we do have a Trebuchet of Numenor, which is shared between all of the factions with Numenorian heritage. So Gondor have it, Arnor have it, or Arthedain have it, I should say. Obviously Numenor themselves have it, and Umbar here do as well, with their burgundy colour scheme. The Trebuchet itself, of course, is still the most important thing, however, and it behaves in much the same way. Huge damage, really long range, good accuracy if you can get it into the right position. More difficult to use to its fullest if you're the attacker. You know, the defenders should be able to keep it at arm's length with some effectiveness, but if all else fails, they're also decent hammer-wielding infantry in melee. More Corsairs, we have the upgraded Umbar Axguard, so here we can see them. Much more like it, obviously they're going to be a lot more resilient to any sort of range threat when they have that armour, and of course it's just going to help them in melee in terms of survivability as well. We have got some Balagai pikemen as well. Once more, we've got Balagai footmen, a gap here which likely signifies the presence of Rangers of Castamere, very, very damaging, but also easy enough to skirmish down with how lightly armoured Rangers tend to be. Corsair Blackguards, we have Nara and Aru Sentinels and more Balagai archers in there also. In fact, these Balagai archers fully upgraded, so again, you know, really good skirmishing presence that Umbar have, probably better than Numenor. The one area I would say where they're objectively better. And then we also have some Harbingers of Castamere on the end. The fourth attacking army, we have got a couple of units of Umbar Axguard. Once again, Dabo upgrading his units. We have got some fully upgraded Balagai pikemen, so loads of pikes. We've got the fully upgraded Balagai footmen, which is interesting to see as well. I mean, these armour upgrades, you can see how different players have prioritised different units for their upgrades. Everyone's upgraded their Balagai pikemen where they can. These Balagai footmen, however, very taking on the look of the Ardenium Spear Guard as they were before. Corsair Blackguards, several units of the standard Corsairs, again several units of the Alcarondas Legion to act as that melee muscle, a couple of units of fully upgraded Balagai archers, and then some Harbingers of Castamere also. And finally, the final attacking army, we have Tommy playing as another Umbar force, of course. We have got some Balagai pikemen again, Corsairs again, Alcarondas Legion again, Balagai footmen with the upgrades, Umbar Axguard with the upgrades, another Trebuchet of Numenor, so good artillery presence here, another unit of mercenary crossbows as well, just to make sure that they've got good map coverage with their fast movers to prevent any sort of sally outs, and of course that means they have more crossbows at their disposal as well later on. Corsair Blackguards, some standard unupgraded Balagai archers, and some Harbingers of Castamere. So, let's go through the defenders then, the army that will need to hot-foot it over. Of course, Numenor and Umbar have got some real similarities. They do share a lot of their baseline units after all, and this is true here as well. Numenor having access to the upgrades for the Balagai units as well, and the Balagai pikemen with the blue colour scheme as well. So I think, for the most part, they're going to be able to cancel one another out. Umbar will probably have more in terms of this pike unit anyway, but we shall see. The blue and gold trim of the Numenorian Sentinels, however, also over here, so no one's going to have an advantage in terms of the types of pikes, because Numenor and Umbar have exactly the same in that regard. Again, the blue colour scheme, and the gold as well. Belagire archers, once again, skirmishing back and forth. Just through sheer numbers, Umbar should have the edge there, which is going to be an interesting dilemma for Numenor to try and work through, although one thing that they do have perhaps at their disposal, a couple of units here of the ANDUNIE shadow bows, a unit of rangers, and if the last patch still holds in terms of how they are relative to others, the ANDUNIE shadow bows there were the most resilient of all rangers. They had the best armour, so they were able to skirmish better than any other ranger that the game had, and yeah, that could be absolutely vital here. Rangers are highly thought of in the game as it stands, because of the huge amounts of damage they're capable of doing, so that's one thing perhaps that Numenor do have in their favour. And then the Numenorian Royal Guard over here, of course, although actually they have the red capes as well. That's a little bit of an oversight. But yes, they will, I'm sure that they will gain their blue capes back at some point. But again, really good skirmishing. This, however, is where Numenor really do stand apart from their Umbar cousins. The standard, or sort of mid to high tier core that their army has. Numenorian Shield Guard, very, very good spears, especially when it comes to mitigating their own attacking shortcomings thanks to the spear malus. We have several units of Numenorian cohorts as well, which are very similar in terms of what they offer to the Alcarondas Legion, but the Numenorian cohort will make up a bigger proportion of the Numenor force today, just because Numenor are going to have access to more funds individually than the attackers, so lots of Numenorian cohort with Shield Guard here. This is going to be the heart and soul of Numenor's defence, and it will need to pull its weight if they are to be successful. The Royal Legion of Armenelos, also a very, very good bodyguard unit. The sort of thing Umbar don't have access to at all, actually. They don't have a sword and board bodyguard unit, let alone one of the best that the game has to offer. We have got some Numenorian steel bows here as well, of course the armour-piercing skirmishers. They're not really designed to trade back and forth with other archers. They need to be ready to loose their projectiles into the right kind of targets. I think the attacking pikes would probably be one of the good ways of doing it, the Sentinels in particular. We have a Trebuchet of Numenor once again the Warhammer infantry, and like I mentioned, the defenders should be able to get the most out of their artillery in a way that the attackers will struggle to. The very deadly Pharazim Swordmasters, of course, very, very strong. Going to need to see every ounce of their potential today. And we mentioned the Javelin Cavalry, the Lords of ANDUNIE. They are going to be... It's going to be interesting to see how they get utilised, because sallying out is not really an option with the Merc crossbows, I think. Merc crossbows could kite them into oblivion, so they may have to be saved until later. They can be used as standard javelins, and then maybe a breakout with elite cavalry late could be the sort of thing to turn the battle on its head. Then we have a huge blob here under the command of Hidden. We've got, once again, several Numenorian cohort and spears. We've got another Trebuchet of Numenor, so artillery playing a big part once more. Royal Legion of Armenelos are in there with their bronze armour. We've got, again, the Lords of ANDUNIE, so that's going to be interesting to see how they get used. We mentioned the cavalry before. ANDUNIE shadow bows, pretty much the same sort of thing. I mean, there are some more seafarers of Nindamos, which is a point of difference. Obviously, the javelins, and then they can also be used as sort of auxiliary infantry, very similar to the Corsair Blackguards, of course, only with an axe instead of a sword as their main melee weapon. But for the most part, Numenor's roster is not huge, so the differences between these armies are always likely to be fairly limited. I think it does look as though there's probably more seafarers and Belagire units, a few less of the Numenorians, but it offers a more balanced force with a little bit more range than perhaps the army of T.S. Niehoff out there. But for the most part, similar sorts of things, and I would imagine that's also going to be true of the final defending army under the command of Adin over here, who is the one who sent me this battle replay, so big thank you to him. A couple of units of Numenorian cohort once again, Numenorian steel bows. We'll see what sort of restraint the Numenorian players have on using these armor-piercing units. I think this is the first example we've seen, however, of the Axe Guard of Armenelos. There may have been some in the previous army under Hidden's command, but they were just at the centre of the blob. So it gives Numenor essentially an armor-piercing unit in melee, which they did lack. It was the one area where maybe they were a little bit short, but no longer. And Umbar, of course, especially with their upper tier units, do pack on the armour just as much as Numenor, so having access to that AP in melee is going to be very, very useful. Helps offset the edge that Umbar may have with their own Axe Guard. Numenorian cohort, plenty of pikes once again, Sentinels, Belagire. Numenorian cohort here, there's the Pharazim Swordmasters in there. Royal Legion of Armenelos are going to be here, which is unsurprising given the funds they have. There's actually quite a lot of the Axemen here, so going for a little bit more of an aggressive edge to his army here, Adin, in terms of his melee force. The ANDUNIE shadow bows will be very important in this battle again. Even though Rangers have lost their body piercing, I still feel like for defenders, the damage that Rangers are capable of doing still makes them an almost invaluable part of any defensive effort. And yeah, more steel bows and more shield guards. So, I will make a cut as the battle sort of works its way into position. I still think that they're going to be allowing TS Niehoff to get back into the settlement, and he'll have to contend with the bridges as well, actually, unless he just goes up that way, I suppose. But yeah, going to be interesting to see how that goes. Fairly long battle, this one, so I don't know how much of the initial part is just going to be manoeuvring around before things start. But yeah, we'll rejoin when the first damage is being done. I suppose with the newfound, well, or rediscovered Corsairs, I suppose, within the Umbar army, it does make Numenor and Umbar just that little bit further apart than they used to be, but still, the quality core of both still remains. The ANDUNIE shadow bows firing immediately into the advancing Umbarim as they make their way through this narrow gap. The Warlord won't be too concerned about his Corsairs, but maybe a little bit more so about the Trebuchet, who are trying to manoeuvre into position, presumably to try and get some point-blank shots on a very immediately high-quality front line that has been laid on by Adin over here, with the Pharazim Swordmasters at the forefront of things. So the Trebuchet was definitely worthwhile, but it was always going to be a little bit of a tall ask to not expect Numenor to use some of their nasty projectiles. Although, as we have mentioned, Umbar, when it comes to pure skirmishing, probably do have the better of this engagement, or at least in terms of how cost-effective it can be, which, based on the odds that Numenor are dealing with, as long as Umbar can get that right, they're a decent part of the way to victory just with that. Belagair archers up here on the high ground. Some of these positions for a lot of these skirmishers are particularly nasty, you have to say, although TS Niehoff choosing to engage Dabo's expeditionary force into these streets over here. The building's offering a little bit of cover to Umbar as they advance initially, but these Corsairs will get ripped asunder by Numenorian cohorts. We shall see if Dabo is willing to send forward anything with a little bit more steel about them to meet the challenge of these infantrymen. I mean, Alcarondas Legion would be the equivalent. Pikes in close support as well. Umbar are not lacking for numbers, so they shouldn't feel too concerned about doing this, but not using the flaming shot initially here, TS. I wonder if that's a mistake or not, but direct hit nonetheless, hitting both the Alcarondas Legion and the Belagair archers in behind. So a slightly aggressive initial play this. The fire arrows coming forward though. This can set siege equipment on fire. Getting siege out of the way is not exactly the swiftest of things in Medieval 2. Once you commit to something, often you have to stay the course. We'll see if that remains the case here. Another unit of the Numenorian cohorts on the other side. Unfortunately over here though, the Belagair footmen able to nip around the side, although TS is going to double down over here, and this is going to be a surround on the surround. Numenorian cohort will make quick work of the Belagair footmen even with their armour upgrades. The damage that the Numenorian heavier infantry is able to do is their unique selling point, really. Yes, their defensive prowess is well documented, but it's that aggressive edge they have, and this is the problem. You can't really afford to be losing this kind of weapon too early here. It's fine if they just lose one, because all of the ammunition can still be utilised by the other one, but the flaming shot, it's actually seldom seen really, this kind of tactic, but considering how exposed it is and how many bites of the cherry you have, why not? Killing off a decent number of the crew as well. Dangerous in their own right, though the real prize yet to be claimed. We'll keep a weather eye on that as we make our way back to the front end of the settlement. Still nothing over on that front line over there, but it's much more of a traditional opening to a siege battle this, although it doesn't seem to have gone too well for Umbar. I mean, the Corsair Blackguards coming forward, attempting to get some kills primarily on the units in behind. You can see the Pharazim Swordmasters are the real prize, but not a huge amount of casualties at all. Umbar, on the other hand, I mean, the Blackguards themselves are an effective weapon, and they have been dominated, really, as you would expect, by the archers up on the hills. I mean, the Numenorian steel bows in position, the Trebuchet still lying there, loitering with intent. The crew still alive, though battered and bruised as a result of that initial punishment they took. The Corsairs slowly making their way forwards, but the rest of the Numenor army guarding the front of the settlement in no great rush to face off against only Corsairs. Meanwhile, this sort of stone labyrinth, which is on this side of the settlement, Balagai footman clad in blue over here, going to be the initial defensive line, catching out some of her Tumihai's Balagai archers, trying to take away Umbar's ability to deal that slow damage that heavier archers can, is one thing that Numenor are going to have to try and do, or at least force Umbar's hand in terms of committing to full-blooded melee engagements in relatively narrow confines. I mean, it's a lot of Corsairs for a unit of what is ultimately a basic unit of spears to try and mulch their way through, but Numenorian Royal Guard offering their support. Corsairs, not exactly the highest profile target for defending archers to be going after, but it's also not exactly the hardest to fell either. But it is over here, over on this side of the field, where, I mean, Numenor have not been worried about committing some pretty heavy hitters, and in numbers as well. The Royal Legion of Armenelos at the centre of things over here, so Umbar are going to have to commit forward a lot if they are to challenge their distant brethren here. Corsair Blackguards trying to do their thing over here as well, but also over here getting bullied rather from afar. Another one of the trebuchets, this time from on high, firing into Umbar. Of course, one thing they do have in their favour is that morale in their higher end units, so they won't be the easiest faction in the world for Numenor to break the spirit of. The Corsairs possibly, but the high tier core that they have means that Numenor can't rely on psychological warfare to do all of the heavy lifting for them. Defeat seems certain for those Corsairs. We have some Balagai footmen in here as well. Again, nothing of supreme quality from Tommy's army, but Numenorian cohorts and sentinels, archers in support as well, and they were not able to save that artillery piece. That is a big loss. I mean, I do like how aggressive TS is being with his infantry, but the loss of that trebuchet is going to be difficult for the Numenorians to come back from. I mean, the silver lining, I suppose, is that you now have 84 Warhammer wielding infantry that you can send to the front line, who will be pretty effective in melee against the Alcarondas Legion, but it's nowhere near the kind of match-turning effects that a fully operational trebuchet can have. Again, though, can take solace in the fact that the archers do seem to be doing their thing, ripping their way through yet more of these Corsair Blackguards, who so far have had a bit of a tough old time of it. Our Royal Guards still firing from on high. Balagai archers perhaps trying to get some point-blank shots. No, they're going to fire in behind, maybe trying to go after the Rangers, but I mean, it's not going to end that well for them. Corsair Blackguards trying to flee back in behind them. The Legion of Armenelos continuing to do their thing. The less aggressive of the two Numenorian bodyguard units, but still a very effective part of their army nonetheless. There's reinforcements that can be committed over here as well. Some trebuchets still under construction over here. Corsairs making their way forwards now. This Umbar army so far the only one to have not been bloodied in any way. That will change now though, as they commit their first infantry to the admittedly very intimidating front line that Adin has laid on for them. Those pikes with the spears in and amongst them, it is a veritable wall of soldiers. Not the sort of thing that Corsair is going to be able to break through, but still good that they are now pressurising the front line. Umbar starting to square up to Numenor a little bit. Rangers of Castamere trying to do some damage. I mean, they have inflicted some casualties on Numenor here, but you have to say the scale of losses is not really comparable. I mean, there's a lot of those Rangers that have also fallen by the wayside, so things have definitely gone Numenor's way up front for now, but we'll see. They have had to commit a lot of their resources in order to be able to do this, and cutting their losses now. No need to remain here when it no longer suits them. Retreat back around the corner, and rinse and repeat, I suppose. Bad news for the Warlord. units making their way forward. Balagaya footman at the centre of things now as well, adding a little bit more rigidity to the forces that are starting to put pressure on Adin's other front line. Very nice position for them to be in, though. A little bit more difficult for Umbar to actually get ranged support in, unlike over here where there's a little bit more room to play with for the attackers. So far, things being handled reasonably well over there. Meanwhile, here, Seafarers of Nindamos being pulled off the front line. Did they utilise their ammunition first? I would imagine they did. Balagaya footman and also some of the Numenorian cohort now. Umbar starting to look a little bit lightweight on the front line, pushing through with their Balagaya archers and footmen to go after the opposing Balagaya archers clad in burgundy. Spears interrupting them as they move. I mean, it's an interesting move to bring the mercenary crossbowmen forward when it's spears that have penetrated your lines. I mean, they will be very effective at dealing damage at close range, but this is a risky play. Alcarondas Legion as well, so Umbar turning up the heat once again from this approach. Arrows just flying back and forth as well. I mean, Arcanine Shadow Bows, there's a lot of arrows, however, being buried into the dirt over here. Not the best use of ammunition from hidden there. We've seen time and time again defenders in a 5v3 start off very well, but they just don't have the resources to sustain their good performances, and that's exactly the sort of thing which can be to their detriment. Balagaya Archers, Arcanine Shadow Bows again, 2 units of them. I mean, they are keeping Umbar at bay, but is it efficient or not? We shall have to wait and see. Over here, meanwhile, I mean, attacking trebuchets as well, managing to score some hits on TS's army. Pulling back a little bit by the looks of it, although did the Royal Legion of Armenelos get completely destroyed? I'd be surprised. No, they just got retreated. 46 of them remain. They will still have a part to play in this one. Renewed assault from Umbar over here, the Balagaya footmen, with a few archers that are out of ammunition as well. The bulk of this front line. I have to remember the previous version of this unit which used that model was a very high tier spear indeed. Now they are simply just a supercharged regular unit, so expectations have to be adjusted accordingly, and the equivalent Numenorian units which are guarding this approach will have the beating of them, even without the support that the Seafarers are laying on. Those javelins will be effective against the newfound plate armour of these footmen. Again, attacking archers. It's the sort of thing which is difficult to quantify, easier to see from a defending perspective what they're shooting at. As for the attackers, though, they're never going to have the best angles, but then they don't need to be as brutally effective. They just need to do enough. Well, there goes a bouncing shot from the attacking trebuchet. Something else which is now a part of the game. Ultimately that came to naught, but something of a more chaotic addition. The long-range artillery. Again, defending trebuchet getting another good hit on the Corsair Blackguards. Umbar really wanting these units for good reason to be able to get into a good position to support their advances. It's exactly the sort of thing which, if they can get a few volleys to land squarely, can do a good amount of damage to those Numenorian front lines. Volleys coming in, Numenorians on attack and defence, of course, today. Over here, steel bows up on that, and again we saw the bouncing projectile. I'm not entirely sure where that one went. High into the Numenor sky. Over here, meanwhile, Pharazim Swordmasters from Adin being transferred across over to this front line. Mostly just Corsairs and Balagaya units still, so it's not as if Umbar have committed anything overly important to their cause for the moment. Numbers, yes, but quality, not really. Javelins continuing to rip their way through. X-Guard ready to roll forwards as well. That is the kind of armour-piercing addition which could call Numenor's structural rigidity into question. Numenorian cohort and shield guard taking a few hits from rangers that are still here. Shields will help, but rangers are still pretty venomous, even with those factors to consider. I'm going to make an infantry assault. I mean, if I were the warlord, I would be very tempted to, purely because they do have a little bit more room than their allies on the other side, and if they do commit more units over here, Adin has to defend from 2 angles rather than potentially just the one if he did decide to retreat. But of course, fully engaging reduces his flexibility to do that. This will be a test of that Numenorian quality. They do still have the quality advantage, but they are getting a lot of numbers thrown at them. Perhaps an indicator of some of the changes that Umbar can make use of as a faction now, of course. Having access to more Corsairs than they did before does allow them to engage in that numbers-based warfare, which many of Sauron's minions can. Balagai pikemen and more shield guard adding themselves to the front line, starting to see more Alcarondas Legion once again. Umbar trying to up the ante in terms of their own quality over on this front line. Still not a huge amount of progress to show for that. Over here, meanwhile, Pharazim Swordmasters, there are Lords of ANDUNIE right in and amongst things over here. In and amongst their own men, however, which means they can charge through and go after the slightly squishy archers. Normally cavalry left in melee isn't exactly the best idea, but considering they have the numbers advantage and it's only Balagai archers, finishing them off does make a certain amount of sense. As long as they don't get caught here, a renewed Umbar assault could trap them, and that is in danger of happening slightly with some of these Umbar Axe Guard trying to make their way around the flank. They could also make life less comfortable for the ever-decreasing number of Naru Sentinels. This is the problem, of course. Umbar have more lives to spend, is the brutal truth of it. Defeat almost a certainty for the Axe Guard for now, but if they can... the attacking artillery proving to be a bit of a problem as well, and going after the Pharazim Swordmasters no less, so more good fortune for Umbar. If their luck holds with that artillery, then this could yet prove to be a very fruitful advance indeed. Getting rid of Numenor completely is going to be fairly difficult. Trying to consolidate their gains now with some advancing pikes of their own, the aggression from the Axemen, the rigidity of the Alcarondas Legion, and then the pikes just to try and tie everything together, though of course the arrows still fly. Arrows from rangers no less. More Ardenian shadow bows over here trading back and forth, but I believe it is still the case that the Ardenian shadow bows are the rangers with the highest armour, and that is going to serve them well here. Could prove to be a very important distinction indeed. Meanwhile, this front line looking a little bit more well organised, no gaps for Umbar to yet take advantage of, as the spears and pikes continue to bar the way for a admittedly less high quality advance over here, still mostly Corsairs. Still some pikes and Alcarondas Legion at the centre, and more Alcarondas Legion advancing as well to make our way over the heart of the settlement. Things over here starting to look a little bit unfortunate for Numenor. How much of this was an organised retreat and how much of it wasn't. I mean, admittedly, most of the corpses on the floor do seem to be that of Umbar, but to a certain extent Numenor must have been caught cold here, because there's still units like these Seafarers which have seemingly been left behind. Seafarers will be pretty damn good actually with their enhanced attacking abilities against stuff like Corsairs and unupgraded Umbar Axe Guard, but they will struggle, of course, against the great and the good of the Umbar army. The Alcarondas Legion in particular will have too much for them, which is probably why they're trying to flee the scene, although there is nowhere for them to go, unfortunately for them. I don't think. They can try and regroup themselves, but I highly doubt Umbar is going to let them get away with such things, and the Axemen will charge them down. A better engagement for them though. This one. As Umbar try to consolidate their gains. More choke points await them, however, and of course the further into the settlement you go, the more you know the defenders are going to fight for every inch of ground. You have that as a certainty, simply because there's nowhere left for them to go. Meanwhile, on this front line over here, Numenor continuing to hold on against this continuing advance from the Warlord. Again, starting to see more and more of a presence of the Umbar Axe Guard now throughout all of the Umbar advances. Of course, the Numenorians do have their equivalent units, we haven't actually seen in direct action yet. But Umbar, of course, had this unit in one shape or another in the last patch, so we know that having an armour-piercing shock troop is something they always could leverage, and against the likes of Numenor it does give them that extra bit of spice. Numenor going to try and wheel themselves back a bit. Pharazim Swordmasters still on the front line. I mean, here are actually some Axe Guard of Armenelos on the front line. They'll do very well against the equivalent Belagai footmen. They'll also be pretty good against the Alcarondas Legion, though they may need a little bit of backup to be at their full effectiveness against such a unit. Oof. There goes one of the attacking generals, Harbingers of Castamere, directly hit by a defending trebuchet. We already mentioned morale shocks, not the be-all and end-all for Umbar, but it's still not a good thing. I think that may have been Tommy's general as well, in fact. There's the artillery piece that inflicted that grievous loss. Anyway. It's on the way forward. Numenorian cohorts. Steel bows, trying to reinforce the front line. I mean, the Pharazim Swordmasters, who have been under the cosh for a while, still standing. The artillery, not enough to lay them low. Still got some seafarers in support of them as well. It's not completely alone with this. Mercenary crossbowmen will be a problem, however, for them. And you have to say, the attackers don't have a limitless supply of units over here any longer. Davo maybe with a few more than Tommy's army. Doubtless Numenor have had to pour an awful lot of resources into achieving this outcome, and they still are not assured of victory over here yet either. But it is a good sight if Numenor can completely dismantle the attackers from one angle. The attacking artillery now remounted, once again also being retargeted by Adin, not keen on allowing that trebuchet to be used. Only 5 of them remain as well, and you can see it is the steel bows that are targeting them, which accounts for why they're falling so quickly, because every one of those steel bowmen that finds his mark, it's pretty likely to be a kill. Only 4 of them remain as well. 2 more of them fell there, which I think means if there's only 2 of them, I don't think they can man the artillery properly anymore. No, there's 3. I can't remember if it's for a trebuchet, is it 4 that you need in order to be able to man the artillery piece effectively? I mean, it doesn't matter, one of them just got mowed down, so if nothing else, Adin has got what he wanted. That trebuchet will not be able to be utilised against his infantry positions, which, considering the stakes of this engagement, it was actually very necessary that he managed to achieve that goal. He needs to hope that he has enough left to try and curtail Umbar's infantry strength as well, however. Umbar trying to bank their shots into the back of the Pharazim Swordmasters, who are doing very well over here now as well, and a reinforcing unit of Numenorian cohort to clog this approach up once again. And Umbar not going to have quick access by any means. Lots of Corsairs still. I mean, when you have a look around at what's left on the battlefield for them to commit, not much. 2 Corsairs outside the settlement over here. Not much from the Warlord either. So, front-loaded defence leads to needing to commit forward more on the attack. Numenor, in terms of the ground covered, has made the most progress of any attacker, but he's going to need some of his allies to start making some territorial gains as well, otherwise Numenor will be feeling pretty good going into the later stages, although more good point-blank hits from a unit like these Merc crossbows will fill them with a bit more confidence. Pretty good point-blank hits. Still more reinforcements as well, which is probably where Numenor also has a little bit of an edge over his allies for the time being. More shirtless hooligans clash with the Numenorians. Iron shadow bows now in melee. So far, definitely an important cornerstone of the Numenorian defence. The damage that they were doing in the earlier stages very important. Now having to muck in melee. I mean, they have a little bit more finesse about them, admittedly, but this is actually where their higher armour values maybe will make them a little bit less efficient, because it will make those axes just that little bit more effective against them. Steel bows and the other unit of Pharazim Swordmasters, the one that has until now not been committed, is now going to head to the front line and try and stifle this Umbar advance as well. I mean, surely these crossbows should be making the Swordmasters their target, but the Swordmasters themselves will be going after the horseback mercenaries. Artillery still being used as well. Right on the edge of the cliff. And there's the rest of the trebuchet crew as well. What a weird setup this is. I mean, they need to hope that they can use it like this, because it's now stuck. Admittedly, if Numenor win from this position, they've done very well for themselves. The artillery has been getting some hits throughout the battle, as we have seen, but you have to say they haven't made maximum use of their artillery, at least not from what we've seen. T.S. Niehoff losing his very, very early. Hidden's stuck against the cliffside now as well. Several of the buildings within the settlement showing scars of battle. Numenorian sentinels for the attackers now, anchoring them in place, and they may not have much left, the attackers over here, but there is signs that maybe they can outlast the defenders in some of these engagements. Another force on the way forwards now, Numenorian cohorts. Shore things up once again. 88 of them, but getting hit by flaming shots. Some very depleted seafarers also making their way down here as well. Do Umbar have the gumption to be able to force their way through? I mean, they do have their harbingers at the back, and they do have high tier pikes, but a not insubstantial amount of that force is also made up of stuff like Corsair crossbowmen, who are not the last word in terms of quality. Once again, harbingers of Castamere, certainly a deeper advance over here. Numenorian sentinels as well. I mean, it's taking them a while, but I do think Umbar will be able to get through here. They've got the pike support now as well. It's going to take them a while, but I think they will. Is this delaying tactic from Numenor going to be enough to allow their allies to accomplish anything? Get that trebuchet. I mean, they may as well wait at this point to utilise that trebuchet. Lords of ANDUNIE going after the mercenary crossmen and easily destroying them. They have an opportunity to cross the bridges now, perhaps, and try and hit the attacking force from the rear. The Umbar trebuchet crew. I mean, could be pretty deadly to cavalry under normal circumstances, but not exactly ideal for them. Wavering as well. Tommy's army looks to be exceedingly battered and bruised at this point. As they charge, trying to do as much damage as they can to the cavalry. Over here, though, probably the more important of the two engagements, actually, and the Numenor defensive line looking a bit thin over here as well. This is always the thing with a 5v3. As well as Numenor have been doing in terms of dealing that high level of damage that you need, it's whether or not they themselves are able to weather the storm as well. There are signs that, I mean, it's a close run thing, because Umbar themselves are not exactly looking healthy in some of these positions. Those Balagar archers offering what support they can, try and use flaming shot to maybe rout some of the more basic elements of the Umbar force, and is that having an effect? All those Corsairs were thinking of running for a second then, but they are not. Yeah, Umbar now, they see they have the mass advantage, so they're going to try and force their way through. As the flaming shot continues to flow. See if that's enough come the end of the battle to have made a big difference. I mean, the problem that Numenor have now is that they're not domineering any one of the approaches, and they kind of need to, so that reinforcements can then shore up other positions. Although I say that, Kharazim Swordmasters getting in and amongst things over here, so they will win over here. Whether this level of reinforcement from hidden is going to be enough remains to be seen. Further down, any reinforcements to be had? Corsairs, 24 of them. Numenorian cohort completely circumventing the situation, so they will have a victory. Where they commit these reinforcements is going to be important, especially considering the quality of the Kharazim Swordmasters, which has already been displayed. Numenor Sentinels in the right position could be absolutely vital, although there goes Adin's general. Numenor themselves, of course, much like Umbar, not ones to panic in the face of adversity, but in much the same way the loss of a general can hardly be considered a good thing. Seafarers of Nindamos. Well, as if on cue, there goes Hertumnahai's general, although not much of that Umbar force left anyway, but that's 2 generals lost for Umbar to the 1 of Numenor, and now the use of this Numenorian cavalry could be absolutely vital. They need to cycle charge in and out pretty quickly, however, because of the presence of all the spears and especially the pikes that are still over here for Umbar. But still, that cavalry cycle charging in and around all of these Umbar units could still be extremely important. Rangers of Castamere with a bit of ammunition. Flaming shot being used. Harbingers from the Warlord forcing their way through, trying to make the engagement just a little bit messier. That still does suit Umbar in this situation after all. Further up, Seafarers retreating. I mean, again, on horseback, trying to cycle charge as best they can. Over here as well it was T.S. Nihoff's general fleeing. Dabo and whatever is left from Tommy will have their armies now, presumably to go and clear up Adin's army. Hidden moving over a few of his own units as well. Is Hidden going to get over there in time to save Adin? Because I think he needs to at this point. You can't leave your ally. Even if you feel as though maybe there's a position back here to dig into, it's not going to be a good idea. You simply won't have the numbers to be able to take on all of these armies all on your lonesome. You're going to need at least some backup. Seafarers of Nindamos had arrived, so some of his forces making their presence felt. But Numenor starting to run a little low on manpower. Sentinels now being used as a backstop from the Warlord because the advantage has been claimed in terms of the frontal engagement at the very least. Now, that one unit of Seafarers may have arrived first, but the rest of Hidden's army did not. And instead, the bulk of the reinforcements that are going to arrive first are from the victorious Umbar from the other side against T.S. Nihoff. Umbar Axguard arriving first. Getting out of the way for Alcarondas Legion maybe, or maybe they were going to preemptively retreat in the face of that trebuchet, but deciding better on it when they see that the angle is not actually going to
be all that effective, and now they're using rotting meat. I think all the ammunition has gone anyway, on the off chance that one shot managed to thread the needle. Harbingers. Still in good number as well. 69 of them. Remnants of those trebuchets. Lord's General still very much alive as well. So I think that's going to be the end of this position over here. T.S. Nihov actually with a unit of Numenorian cohort could probably have done with those on his front line, considering how things ultimately ended up going for him. And perhaps as we're going on, I mean, when you see these blobs of Umbar infantry, one's thought does start to turn to the certainly one, but arguably two units of trebuchet that Numenor have not been able to effectively deploy. Of ANDUNIE getting in there. I think I'm saying that correctly, although that's a word I do not have any reference for, I don't think. So I may be completely butchering it. I'm sure the comments will let me know. Rangers hanging out. A good victory this for Umbar. And hidden, shoring themselves up. I mean, it's hard really to blame him at this stage in proceedings. He was never going to make it on time to support Add-in, but I feel like just that fact is enough to convince me that Umbar are probably going to go on to win this. I mean, we will be getting into the final 10,000 frames momentarily. Anything's possible, I suppose. Meanwhile, backs to the wall, if nothing else. This trebuchet crew being backs to the wall means that they will be fairly effective at what they do in melee, especially if it's only basic Corsairs they're going after. They'll cut their way through a fair number of them. Balagai pikemen shuffling their way forwards as well. On the way forward as well. They even look fairly menacing in melee now that they've got that armour. Sword and board unit in melee now. Well, more impressive sword and board unit than the buckler and knife that they essentially have in their regular form. Being run through a few of those Umbar and however by those warhammers, that would certainly not be comfortable. Good litmus test of how effective these guys are in melee, actually, because if they are able to ratchet up an impressive kill count for themselves, it will make things look a little bit more palatable come the end game for Numenor, as the rest of the army starts to make its way forward. The question of quality does come up. I mean, I think the fact that they've still got those Harbingers is a big deal. Naru Sentinels. Still got some Pharazim Swordmasters. Not devoid of quality, Numenor. They'll never be devoid of quality, but they are fairly devoid of numbers at this stage. Perhaps the fact that they've still got some units chipping away at the edges of Umbar is actually a good thing. Umbar trying to deal with this threat in the most efficient manner that they can, but I think they'd be best off just trying to squash them underfoot with some really high-end stuff. Sending some Umbar Axe Guard to try and fight fire with fire. The pikes will kind of ensure that there's nowhere this trebuchet crew can go, and actually they are shaken. Artillery crewmen, so perhaps it would be asking a bit much of them to be as mentally rigid as some of their betters in the Numenor army, but they need every last man to do their part now. Numenor. So there's some crossbows in the background over there, although I think they've got their melee weapons out, so little more than late game fodder to be used. One of the attackers is fleeing. Numenor cavalry still? Yeah, Lords of ANDUNIE. Tommy's army, I think, now completely gone with the loss of those final Corsairs, so that's something. The cavalry, it really does depend. I mean, the cavalry can be the sort of thing which can turn this battle in Numenor's favour. Whether they will have the opportunity to be used to their fullest remains to be seen. Bump. I thought that was going to be a charge, but that unit already routing. And with this is, all they really need to do is set themselves up, advancing up the hill, and then leave one of the units of pikes pointing the other way, and that effectively neuters the cavalry entirely, although it is really only hidden that remains. Cavalry is still cycling around the units at the base of the Lord's Keep. The trebuchet crew. So what now remains, we will just momentarily go up to ×2 speed just to try and hasten things along for Umbar over here, because at this point it's really just a case of trying to set the table. The cavalry being perhaps the one variable to keep an eye on. If they do have an opportunity to strike, they should probably take it, given the fact that Numenor do need to make a few more, or take a few more chunks out of Umbar first. Corsairs fleeing. Hits being scored on the Numenorian cohort. The fact that you can still hear the dull mechanical clank of crossbows is always a bad thing. It's not as if Numenor can counterattack in this sort of situation, but if you can't finish off these units like these crossbows, it's always going to be a bit of a concern. Lords of ANDUNIE thinking about it, but thinking better of it as well. They should, against admittedly 2 units of sentinels, but in this case it actually makes them just that little bit more manoeuvrable. Maybe going down there, not the best idea. Umbar, if they so chose, and I think they have done so now, yes, they can block off every approach to their main infantry with pikes now. So perhaps taking that long route around from hidden wasn't the best idea. It maybe would have been best to go for the slightly risky alpha strike earlier on when they found themselves in this sort of situation. It's also worth saying as well, we rapidly skipped over them there for a while, but you can see that they are just being bled now. Kind of a bit tragic, but can't blame them. Can't blame Umbar for doing this. It is the smart thing to do, and after all, the defenders wouldn't have been saying the same thing earlier on when they were having things all their own way with skirmishes, and I did wonder if maybe they were being a bit gung-ho with all of that ammunition they had. And in the end, it does seem as though that is going to be the case. Loss of trebuchets, overzealousness perhaps with projectiles, as much as it may look flashy as you ratchet up those kills in the earlier sections. Playing the long game is the important thing here, and I think Umbar are going to have too much left in the tank for Numenor. I mean, unless somehow those Pharazim Swordknights, I mean, you may as well commit them at this point. There's going to be no tomfoolery that you're going to be able to engage in, which is going to make this engagement any better or worse for you. You can try and force your way through. If Umbar are paying attention, they shouldn't allow this to transpire. So point blank javelin hits as well. Every one Pharazim that is killed brings Umbar just that little bit closer to victory. What happened to the Lords? It's still there, still 23 of them, but yeah, like I said, there's no way through. They're going to need to rely on their infantry putting on such a good performance that some of those pikes are needed to help shore things up from the front, and then the cavalry would have the gap, and if things were already that dire for the infantry, that should be enough to win. But at this point, spectators more than anything, the Lords, until inevitably things likely get too desperate for Numenor and they have to kamikaze charge onto the end of Umbar's pikeman. Just taking stock of things. I mean, it is a good thing they still have those Harbingers of Castamere, otherwise the sheer quality of the Pharazim and their supporting cast, including pikes, could have been enough. I think positionally things would have needed to have been selected slightly better even still, but an intriguing battle this has been nonetheless. Just taking stock of the pikes. Still 2 units of Harbingers of Castamere, let's not forget. Corsair Blackguards and Corsair Crossbowmen cycling around. Harbingers of Castamere thinking about doing that as well. So they will be able to surround Numenor as well, not with the cream of the crop exactly, but it's better than nothing. It will just bring the end of the battle just that little bit closer. I mean, they need to get these units in a little bit more quickly, perhaps, you would say. Pharazim Swordmasters, though, starting to tumble a little bit in terms of numbers. One Harbinger still waiting back there, menacingly. Yeah, I mean, at this point you may as well, like, you're not going to gain anything by the Lords just sort of sitting there. You can try and bludgeon your way through quickly. It's not going to work, but you never know. Maybe a couple of them will get through without routing, and then you can try it. But I mean, it would be more than a Hail Mary at this point in time, I would suggest. Really, I think the only reason this battle is still just shy of 5,000 frames long is the resilience of some of the Numenor units that are still left standing. At least I hope it's not a kiting around the place in the Lords of ANDUNIE that this battle ends with. Harbingers getting in amongst things. I mean, a duel between these two. Impressive, brother against brother in a way, and of course he left as soon as I got a good angle of it. Typical. Players starting to admit defeat now. Still the cavalry. Still kicking around the place, but there's going to be no way through. ×2 speed it shall be then. There's not really much left to say now. Pharazim Swordmasters have been very impressive in this battle, and they will continue to be so. But not so impressive that Numenor is going to have a victory to speak of come the end of the day. Cavalry, 18 of them still. Squeezing in still. Impressive still. I mean, a lot of units would have folded by now. One of the Umbar generals in the background, overseeing what is effectively an execution at this point. I think it's because the pikes are on the front line, of course, and they don't do damage particularly quickly. Very reliably, but not quickly. So that's it for them. So what remains? There is a blue arrow over here. Nothing of any importance by the looks of things, however. Which means the only unit that remains is the cavalry, and he's running around in circles. Come on, man, you're better than this, surely. Well, ×6 speed for you. There we go. ×2 it shall be. Having a look at the percentages, 3% is all the difference. I mean, it does go to show how Umbar is able to field slightly larger armies now. There's not a huge amount of them left, but maybe just shy of 200. A lot of those Corsair units, of course, very, very numerous indeed. I really don't understand. The credit in the bank you get from kills such as this in the late game are quite limited. More of them getting trapped. Numenor to go on to win this, of course. That would be unfortunate, because it means this is the sort of thing that everyone will then try to do. There's pikes in here though, so probably not. Very resilient unit of cavalry this, even as they get caught in melee. Usually the end of many a cavalry unit. What on earth is going on here? Well, there we have it. We have an amount of kills for several of the attacking forces. That's a little bit of a weird post-game bug. Still, just shy of 5,000 kills for one of the defenders. Just over 4,000 for another one. T.S. Niehoff, we can see his name at the very least, splitting the difference of 4,500. Can we see what's good here? Is that enough to fix it? No. Okay. Well, we can try and judge them based upon this. I mean, ANDUNIE shadow bows, very important part of the defence, the most important singular unit, you would say. Pharazim Swordmasters did well on an individual basis. Front lines of Numenor all round are always going to be effective in terms of getting kills relative to similar units from other factions, but yeah, 3 figures all round for Adin, so I think he got the most amount of kills on the field today. One unit breaking 600, the rest, again, a bit of a mix between sort of like the mid 300s right down to just over 100, but that's a good return on pretty much everything there. Hidden's army, meanwhile, Lords of ANDUNIE getting 402, a few of those, again, like I said, it's late game sort of carrion basically, so padded a little bit, but still did very well. Still a threat, of course, which Umbar had to marshal throughout the whole thing. 408 kills actually on the trebuchet is pretty good. Probably about 100 of them came in melee against Corsairs. So 308 is actually pretty good return on this trebuchet at the very least, so possibly when we weren't looking that was able to ratchet up some good kills again. Shadowbows doing well, getting at least 300 each. A few units dipping below 100 over here, but still. And then T.S. Niehoff's army, I liked how aggressive he was. Ultimately though, the trebuchet, 104 kills still, but most of those would have come in melee because they got one shot off basically, which would have been enough good for about 10 kills. The rest, however, all coming in melee, which shows how effective they can be in melee, which shows how important this kind of unit can be for Numenor and any other Numenorian faction when they're on the defence, having such a tool that can be used for more than one thing. A few units breaking 400 again, Numenorian cohort. Shadowbows again getting at least, I say that, 266, the lowest return from a single unit of Rangers, but that's still not exactly terrible now, is it? But yes, so this is a bit of a weird one, isn't it? But oh well. Big thank you to Tommy, I believe it was, who sent this one in. I got sent about 3 right around the same sort of time, and then I got sent away for 5 days for work, so I'm only just recording this now as November starts to kick in. But I think this was Tommy. It's definitely Tommy who made this map, I think. But yeah, big thank you to him. Big thanks to all the players as well that made this one possible. Starting to get into a few more patch previews now. As far as what's going to be coming up soon, more of these, of course, a facsimile of Gondolin, which I think was made by the Wound Raider, a couple of other battle replays that have been given to me on the test build as well, and also a look or two at Silmarillion with a new gameplay overhaul that has recently come out for that as well. So yeah, that'll be pretty much the content which will take us up to Christmas and the New Year, during which time, of course, I will do an end-of-year wrap-up as well, which will be especially pertinent this year, I think, because this year has probably seen the biggest change in the channel since I moved to Wales for work. So yes, it's going to be yeah, it'll be very important, I think, that one, because going into next year, some sort of plan needs to be put into place. Of course, not all of it is based upon things that I can control, but that will still be something that we need to do before the end of the year. But plenty of content between then and now, a few more patch previews, of course, and the gameplay overview, or the new gameplay overhaul, anyway, from Silmarillion. So yeah, big thanks to all the players, big thanks to Tommy once again.